Some danger does not arrive with yelling. It arrives with quiet. It arrives when nothing seems wrong, when voices stay calm, when smiles look polite but feel cold, when a door closes too softly like it does not want to be noticed, when a room feels normal, yet your breathing becomes careful, slow, controlled. People are taught to fear noise. We fear anger. We fear fists and broken objects. But many people are never taught to fear silence. Silence looks peaceful. Silence looks mature. Silence looks safe. But sometimes silence is not peace. Sometimes silence is pressure. Sometimes silence is control. This story is not about drama. It is not about passion or romance. It is about the moments no one sees, the moments when something feels wrong but you cannot explain why, the moments when you tell yourself to stay calm, to be polite, to not make problems, the moments when you start doubting your own feelings. Because the most painful thing is not being hurt. The most painful thing is being ignored, being told you are too sensitive, being told you are imagining things, being told nothing is wrong when your body knows something is wrong. Silence teaches people to disappear quietly. It teaches them to shrink, to wait, to survive without being seen. And over time, silence becomes louder than shouting, heavier than anger, harder to escape. This is a true-to-life emotional story. This story asks you listen. Silence can be more dangerous than noise. Chapter 1. The House That Went Quiet. I was 21, but fear had lived with me for years. It did not arrive suddenly. It did not announce itself. It grew quietly, the way dust gathers in corners you stop looking at. By the time I noticed it, fear already knew my name. From the outside, the house looked normal. Clean windows that caught the afternoon light, quiet neighbors who waved lightly, a small front yard that stayed neat. Inside the kitchen, there was a nice wooden table, always wiped clean. Nothing looked broken, nothing looked wrong. Anyone passing by would think it was a peaceful home. But inside, the air felt heavy, not because of shouting, not because of noise, because of waiting. Waiting for footsteps, waiting for a voice to change, waiting for a mood to shift without warning. The house was quiet, but the quiet was tense. It pressed against my chest. I learned to listen carefully. I could tell who was moving by the sound of their steps. I could hear when a door closed with too much force or when it closed too softly. I learned to measure my voice. Too loud felt risky. Too quiet felt suspicious. So I spoke in the middle, careful and controlled. I learned to become small. I learned where to sit so I would not be noticed. I learned how to move through rooms without making sound. I learned which questions were safe and which ones were dangerous. I learned that silence could keep things calm, at least for a while. My bedroom became my only comfort. It was not large. It had a narrow bed, a small desk, and a single window that faced the street. But it had a door. That door mattered. Every night I locked it. I checked it twice, sometimes 3 times. The sound of the lock clicking into place helped me breathe. I slept with a book in my hand, like a shield. The pages gave me somewhere else to go, somewhere quiet that did not feel threatening. When my eyes grew tired, I kept the book close to my chest. It made me feel less alone. It made the room feel safer. At night, the house made small sounds, pipes shifting, the floor creaking, a distant door opening and closing. Each sound made my body tense. My heart learned to beat faster without my permission. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself nothing bad was happening. Still, my body did not listen. During the day, I acted normal. I helped in the kitchen. I answered questions. I smiled when I was expected to smile. I told myself that if I stayed quiet, if I stayed respectful, everything would stay calm. Silence felt like protection, but silence also felt lonely. There were things I wanted to say and questions I wanted to ask. Each time, I swallowed them. I told myself it was not important. I told myself other people had it worse. I told myself I should be grateful. Those thoughts kept me quiet. Sometimes I stood in my room and looked at the door. I wondered why I needed it locked so badly. I wondered why my chest felt tight even when nothing was happening. I wondered why peace felt fragile, like glass that could break at any moment. One evening, I sat on my bed with the lights off. The house was silent again, too silent. I listened to my own breathing and noticed how shallow it was. My hands were cold. My shoulders felt stiff. I whispered to myself, barely loud enough to hear, "Why do I feel unsafe in my own home?" The question hung in the air. I waited. I listened. No one answered. No voice came from the hallway. No reassurance followed. Only the house answered, with silence. And in that silence, I understood something I was not ready to say out loud yet. A quiet house can still be a dangerous place. Chapter 2. When Trust Felt Dangerous. In the daytime, I tried to act normal. I smiled when spoken to. I washed dishes at the sink. I folded clothes. I said, "I'm fine," in a calm voice that sounded believable even to me. I learned how to perform normal life very well. From the outside, I looked quiet and polite, like nothing was wrong. But my body did not believe my words. It never did. When someone stood too close behind me, my hands began to shake. When a door opened suddenly, my heart jumped hard inside my chest. Small sounds felt too loud. Soft footsteps felt dangerous. Even silence made my muscles tense, like my body was preparing for something it could not name. I told myself to relax. I told myself I was safe. I told myself I was being dramatic. But fear stayed. It lived in my shoulders, my stomach, my breath. My body reacted before my thoughts could catch up. It knew something my mind was still afraid to admit. The worst part was not what he did. It was what I could not prove. He did not always scream. He did not always hit. There were no clear marks, no loud moments that felt easy to explain. Instead, there were looks that lasted too long, questions that felt unnecessary, comments that sounded harmless but left me confused. He watched. He noticed everything. He asked where I was going. He asked why I closed my door. He asked why I needed privacy. His voice stayed calm, almost polite. That made it harder. If he had been angry, I might have understood, but his calmness made me doubt myself. He did not like closed doors. That detail stayed with me. If I closed my bedroom door, he asked why. If I locked it, he noticed. He never forced it open. He never needed to. His questions were enough. They made me feel wrong for wanting space. And my mother? She looked away. She stayed busy. She cleaned. She worked. She talked about other things. When I tried to catch her eye, she seemed tired, distracted, already somewhere else. Her silence hurt more than his questions. At night, I replayed moments in my head. I asked myself if I was overreacting. I wondered if other people would see this as normal. I told myself maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I was imagining patterns that were not real. Those thoughts were exhausting. They turned my mind against itself. Every feeling came with a second voice asking if it was valid. Every fear came with shame. I learned to doubt my own instincts. One night, I finally tried to speak. We were sitting at the table. The house was quiet. The moments felt calm enough. My hands were shaking, but I spoke anyway. Very softly, I said, "Something is wrong." The words felt heavy as they left my mouth. I waited. I hoped for a question. I hoped for concern. I hoped for anything that sounded like listening. She did not ask why. She did not ask how I felt. She did not ask what I meant. She looked at me and said, "Stop making stories." That sentence broke something inside me. Not loudly, not all at once. Something small cracked and did not repair itself. It taught me a cruel lesson that night, that being honest did not always bring safety, that speaking could make things worse. After that, I stopped trusting my voice. If my own mother did not believe me, who would? If she thought I was imagining things, maybe I was. I began to watch myself the way others watched me. I questioned my reactions. I measured my fear. Trust did not break with shouting. It did not break with anger. It broke quietly, through dismissal, through not being heard, through being told my experience was a story, not reality. From that night on, trust felt dangerous. Trust meant risk. Trust meant disappointment. Trust meant opening myself up to being ignored again. So I closed inward instead. I relied only on silence. It felt safer than hope. Trust can disappear without noise. Chapter 3. Leaving Without Goodbye. I was 21, but fear had lived with me for years. It did not arrive suddenly. It did not announce itself. It grew quietly, the way dust gathers in corners you stop looking at. By the time I noticed it, fear already knew my name. From the outside, the house looked normal. Clean windows that caught the afternoon light, quiet neighbors who waved politely, a small front yard that stayed neat. Inside the kitchen, there was a nice wooden table, always wiped clean. Nothing looked broken. Nothing looked wrong. Anyone passing by would think it was a peaceful home. But inside, the air felt heavy. Not because of shouting, not because of noise, because of waiting. Waiting for footsteps, waiting for a voice to change, waiting for a mood to shift without warning. The house was quiet, but the quiet was tense. It pressed against my chest. I learned to listen carefully. I could tell who was moving by the sound of their steps. I could hear when a door closed with too much force or when it closed too softly. I learned to measure my voice. Too loud felt risky. Too quiet felt suspicious. So I spoke in the middle, careful and controlled. I learned to become small. I learned where to sit so I would not be noticed. I learned how to move through rooms without making sound. I learned which questions were safe and which ones were dangerous. I learned that silence could keep things calm, at least for a while. My bedroom became my only comfort. It was not large. It had a narrow bed, a small desk, and a single window that faced the street. But it had a door. That door mattered. Every night I locked it. I checked it twice, sometimes 3 times. The sound of the lock clicking into place helped me breathe. I slept with a book in my hand, like a shield. The pages gave me somewhere else to go, somewhere quiet that did not feel threatening. When my eyes grew tired, I kept the book close to my chest. It made me feel less alone. It made the room feel safer. At night, the house made small sounds, pipes shifting, the floor creaking, a distant door opening and closing. Each sound made my body tense. My heart learned to beat faster without my permission. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself nothing bad was happening. Still, my body did not listen. During the day, I acted normal. I helped in the kitchen. I answered questions. I smiled when I was expected to smile. I told myself that if I stayed quiet, if I stayed respectful, everything would stay calm. Silence felt like protection, but silence also felt lonely. There were things I wanted to say and questions I wanted to ask. Each time, I swallowed them. I told myself it was not important. I told myself other people had it worse. I told myself I should be grateful. Those thoughts kept me quiet. Sometimes I stood in my room and looked at the door. I wondered why I needed it locked so badly. I wondered why my chest felt tight even when nothing was happening. I wondered why peace felt fragile, like glass that could break at any moment. One evening, I sat on my bed with the lights off. The house was silent again, too silent. I listened to my own breathing and noticed how shallow it was. My hands were cold, my shoulders felt stiff. I whispered to myself, barely loud enough to hear, "Why do I feel unsafe in my own home?" The question hung in the air. I waited. I listened. No one answered. No voice came from the hallway. No reassurance followed. Only the house answered, with silence. And in that silence, I understood something I was not ready to say out loud yet. A quiet house can still be a dangerous place. Chapter 4. A Place Called Safe. The shelter room was simple. A narrow bed against the wall, a small lamp with warm light, a window that faced nothing important, and a door that locked from the inside. That lock mattered more than anything else in the room. When I turned it for the first time, the sound was soft, but my body noticed it immediately. Still, I could not sleep. I lay on the bed with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling. My body was safe, at least on paper, but my fear was still there. It did not leave just because the address changed. It stayed in my chest, in my shoulders, in the way my breath stopped and started again. Every sound felt too sharp. A footstep in the hallway, a door opening somewhere far away. A voice, even a calm one, made my heart jump. I told myself I was safe now. I repeated it silently, but my body did not believe me yet. That was when I understood something important. Safety does not arrive all at once. It does not rush in and replace fear. It moves slowly. It waits until the body is ready to trust it. A counselor visited me the next day. She knocked gently and waited before entering. That small pause mattered. She did not stand too close. She did not fill the silence with words. She sat in the chair and let the room stay quiet. She asked simple questions. Where did you sleep last night? Did you eat today? How are you feeling right now? When I did not answer right away, she waited. No pressure, no hurry. That felt new. I was used to questions that demanded answers, questions that felt like tests. But these questions felt different. They felt like invitations. One day, she asked something that stayed with me. "What does safe mean to you?" Her voice was calm, not curious in a sharp way, just open. I stared at the floor for a long time. The question felt heavy. I realized I had never really thought about it before. I knew what danger felt like. I knew what fear felt like. But safe felt like an empty word. Images came to my mind. A locked door, a quiet room, no footsteps outside, no questions waiting for me. My chest felt tight as I searched for the right words. Finally, I spoke. My voice was low. "Not being afraid to breathe." The counselor nodded gently. She did not correct me. She did not smile too much. She simply said, "That's a good start." Her voice did not rush past the moment. She let it stay. That was the first time safety felt real. Not like a rule, not like a promise, like a small experience, like a moment my body noticed before my mind did. In the days that followed, I learned the rules of the shelter. They were simple. No yelling, no forced conversations, no explaining your story unless you wanted to. Each rule felt like a quiet hand placed between me and fear. I met other women there. Some spoke easily, some stayed quiet. No one asked questions that felt dangerous. No one demanded details. That absence felt like respect. At night, fear still returned. Memories came without warning. But something was different. When I locked the door, it stayed locked. No one questioned it. No one noticed. That consistency slowly changed how my body reacted. I began to notice small things. I could sit on the bed without holding my breath. I could turn off the lights without panic. I could fall asleep for an hour, then two. Each small moment felt like progress. One evening, I realized I was resting. Not escaping, not hiding, resting. The difference surprised me. Rest did not feel exciting. It felt quiet. It felt boring. And that was okay. I understood then that safety was not happiness. It was not joy or relief or smiles. Safety was rest. It was the absence of constant alertness. It was the ability to be still without fear. That realization changed how I saw myself. I was not weak for needing this place. I was not broken for needing rest. My body had been working hard for a long time. It deserved to stop. The shelter did not erase my pain. It did not fix my past, but it did something important. It stopped adding new pain. And that difference mattered more than anything. Slowly, very slowly, my body began to learn what my mind already knew, that I was safe enough to breathe, safe enough to rest, safe enough to exist without shrinking. Safety was rest. Chapter 5. Letters That Hurt. The letters came sooner than I expected. I was still learning how to breathe in this new place, still learning how to trust quiet rooms and doors that stayed closed. One morning, a staff member handed me an envelope and said softly, "You don't have to read it now." I did not need to ask who it was from. I recognized my mother's handwriting immediately, the curve of the letters, the careful spacing. My chest tightened as soon as I saw it. I took the envelope and nodded, but I did not open it. The paper felt heavy in my hands, like it carried more than words. I kept the letter in my bag all day. I could feel it there, even when I tried not to think about it. It followed me through meals, through conversations, through quiet moments alone. That night, I sat on my bed and took the envelope out. I did not open it right away. I stared at it for a long time, listening to my breathing. Part of me wanted answers. Another part wanted silence. Silence had hurt me before, but it was familiar. Finally, I whispered, "I can do this," and opened the letter. The first line said, "I am sorry." I stopped reading. I folded the paper carefully and placed it beside me. Those words were too small. They sat on the page like they expected to fix something, like they expected to be enough, but they were not. Sorry did not protect me. Sorry did not undo the nights I stayed awake listening for footsteps. Sorry did not give me back the years I spent shrinking inside myself. My heart felt tired, not angry, just tired. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, letting that truth settle. An apology could acknowledge pain, but it could not carry it for me. The next day, another letter came, and then another. Sometimes they were long, sometimes they were short. My mother wrote about confusion, about fear, about not knowing what to do. She wrote about feeling alone. She wrote about regret. I read every word slowly. Each letter stirred something different inside me. Anger, sadness, love, guilt, all of it mixed together. One night I said out loud, "Why didn't you listen?" The room stayed quiet. The letters did not answer back. I realized something difficult then. Reading the letters hurt, but not reading them felt like losing my mother forever. Pain felt closer than silence. Pain felt like connection, even when it burned. During therapy, my counselor asked me a question that stopped me. "What do you want from these letters?" She did not rush me. She waited while I searched myself for an honest answer. I thought about it carefully. I thought about what I hoped for each time I opened an envelope. Finally, I said, "I want the truth, not excuses." Saying that sentence scared me. It meant I was no longer willing to accept words that sounded gentle but changed nothing. It also made me feel strong. For the first time, I understood that wanting truth did not make me cruel. It made me honest. One letter felt different from the others. In it, my mother wrote about the house after I left. She wrote about the quiet. She wrote about finally seeing fear in my eyes when she remembered our last conversation. She wrote that the man was gone now. That letter made me cry harder than the rest. I pressed the paper to my chest and whispered, "I needed you then." My tears were not angry. They were tired, heavy with everything I had carried alone. I cried for the mother I once trusted. I cried for the woman she could have been. I cried for the girl I was when I still believed silence would keep me safe. I tried to write back many times. I picked up my pen and put it down again. Words felt dangerous. Words had hurt me before, but they also felt necessary. One night, I finally wrote a few lines. Not kind, not cruel, just honest. "I am still hurting. I am safe now. I need time." I read those lines again and again before sending them. The letter did not fix anything. It did not bring relief or closure, but it told the truth, and that mattered. As weeks passed, the letters became less frequent. I felt relief and sadness at the same time. I missed her voice, even on paper, but I also felt lighter. The space helped me think. It helped me feel my own strength growing. One afternoon, I placed all the letters in a box. I did not throw them away. I was not ready for that. I closed the box and said softly, "I will open this when I am stronger." That choice felt right. I learned something important during that time. Healing did not mean choosing sides.
It meant choosing myself. It meant allowing truth to exist without rushing forgiveness. An apology is not healing. Truth is the beginning.
Chapter 6. Learning to Stay. For most of my life, I prepared to leave. Not in obvious ways, not with bags packed by the door. I prepared quietly, in my body, in my thoughts, and how I listened for danger and planned my exits before anything even happened. I learned to leave the room when the air felt wrong, leave the house when silence grew heavy, leave conversations before they turned dangerous. Leaving kept me alive, it kept me invisible, it kept me safe enough to survive. So when I arrived at a place where leaving was not required, my body did not understand it. The shelter was calm, the rules were clear. No one watched me closely, no one questioned my movements. I was allowed to stay. That freedom felt strange, even uncomfortable. At first, staying felt like a trap. If I stayed, something bad might happen. If I stayed, I might lose control. Leaving had always been my solution. Now that solution was no longer needed, and I did not know what to replace it with. One night, I sat with another woman at the shelter. We did not talk much. The silence felt heavy in my chest. I shifted in my seat. My hands moved toward my lap, then toward the door without me thinking about it. I don't know how to stay, I said quietly. She looked at me for a moment, then answered in a calm voice. Staying is a skill. You can learn it. Her words surprised me. I had always thought staying was something people either could do or could not do. I had never thought of it as something you could practice. So I tried. I started small, very small. I stayed in a conversation even when my chest felt tight. When my instinct told me to excuse myself, I stayed for one more sentence, then another. I noticed how my body reacted. My heart raced, my shoulders tensed, but nothing bad happened. I stayed in silence without turning it into fear. Silence had always meant danger to me. Silence meant waiting. But here, silence did not demand anything. I practiced sitting with it. I counted my breaths. I placed my feet flat on the floor. I reminded myself where I was. At night, I practiced staying in my room without holding the door handle. That was one of the hardest things. My hand had learned to rest there automatically. Letting go felt risky. I sat on the bed and placed my hands in my lap instead. My body protested at first. Then slowly it softened. Each moment of staying felt like work, emotional work, quiet work. No one clapped for it, no one noticed, but I noticed. Some days I cried without knowing why. The tears came suddenly without permission. Other days I felt calm, almost peaceful. Both felt unfamiliar. I learned that calm did not mean danger was coming. It could just mean calm. In therapy, I talked about my fear of staying. I told my counselor that leaving had always felt smart. She nodded and said, "It was smart. It protected you." That mattered. She did not take my survival away from me. Then she added, "But you don't need that protection in the same way anymore." That sentence stayed with me. It helped me see that staying did not erase my past. It did not mean I was wrong before. It meant my life was changing. I noticed changes in small ways. I could sit through a full meal without feeling restless. I could listen to someone else's story without planning my escape. I could sit with my feelings instead of pushing them away immediately. One evening, a new woman arrived at the shelter. She was crying softly, her voice shaking as she tried to explain herself. I sat beside her and said gently, "You don't have to explain everything right now." She looked at me with surprise. "How do you know?" she asked. I answered honestly, "Because I needed to hear that once." In that moment, I realized something important.
Staying was not only helping me, it was allowing me to be present for others. I was no longer just surviving, I was connecting. Still, some days were hard. Memories returned without warning. A sound, a word, a look. On those days, I did not force myself to be strong. I allowed myself to feel tired. I allowed myself to cry. I stayed with those feelings instead of running from them. One night I said out loud, "I miss my dad." The words felt heavy but true. Another woman across the room said softly, "Me too." No explanation followed, none was needed. I also felt guilt. Guilt for feeling better while my mother was still broken. Guilt for finding calm when others were still hurting. I talked about this in therapy. My counselor said, "You learned that your needs came last." That truth hurt, but it also freed me. Feeling stronger did not mean I was betraying anyone. It meant I was growing, and growth was allowed. Weeks passed, slowly, quietly. I learned to trust routines. I learned to trust calm voices. Most importantly, I learned to trust myself. I did not need to disappear to be safe anymore. Staying did not remove my scars. It did not erase fear completely, but it taught me something new. I could exist in my own life without running. I could sit with discomfort and let it pass. Staying was not easy, but staying was possible. Staying is a skill.
Chapter 7. Still Standing. One morning, I noticed something small. It was not dramatic. There was no sudden happiness, no feeling of victory. I simply woke up and realized I was not afraid. Not completely free from pain, not healed in every way, but not afraid. That realization surprised me. Fear had lived with me for so long that its absence felt unfamiliar. I lay still in bed and listened to my thoughts. They were quiet, not empty, just calm. They did not rush me. They did not warn me to leave. For the first time, my mind felt like a place I could stay. My past was still there. It had not disappeared. The memories still existed. The house, the silence, the nights of waiting, the moments when my voice was ignored. But those memories were no longer driving my life. They were part of my story, not the steering wheel. I sat up slowly and looked around the room. Nothing had changed. Same walls, same light, same sounds. But something inside me had shifted. I was no longer bracing myself for impact. I was simply present. Later that day, I took out the box of old letters. I had avoided them for weeks, not because I was afraid, but because I did not feel ready. That day felt different. Calm enough. Steady enough. I opened the box and held the letters in my hands. I read them slowly, without anger, without hope, just honesty. I did not search for apologies. I did not look for promises. I let the words exist as they were. Then I placed the letters back in the box and closed it, gently, not to erase the past, not to pretend it never happened, but to close the chapter on my own terms. And then I said the most important sentence I have ever said. Not out loud at first, just inside my chest. I forgive myself. Not I forgive everyone. Not everything is okay. Just this. I forgive myself for surviving. I forgive myself for staying quiet. I forgive myself for doing what I needed to do to stay alive. I forgive myself for not knowing what I did not know. Those words lifted something heavy inside me, a weight I did not realize I was still carrying. I had blamed myself for years, for not speaking louder, for not leaving sooner, for not protecting myself better. That blame softened in that moment. Self-forgiveness did not excuse what happened.
It did not change the past, but it changed how I carried it. The pain felt lighter. Not gone, just lighter. I thought about strength differently then. I used to believe strength meant silence. It meant endurance. It meant not feeling anything. I believed strong people did not need help. They did not cry. They did not break. Now I knew better. Strength was honesty. Strength was listening to myself. Strength was staying kind even after being hurt. Strength was choosing truth over comfort. I continued my studies. I showed up to class. I sat closer to the front, not because I wanted attention, but because I no longer wanted to hide. When I spoke, my voice sometimes shook, but it did not disappear. One day, an instructor said, "Your words are honest." I nodded. I did not feel proud. I felt real. And being real felt better than being perfect. I kept writing, not to escape pain, but to understand it. I wrote about silence, about fear, about learning to stay. Some of my writing was shared with others who had lived in quiet danger. People thanked me. Some cried. Some said nothing and held my hand. That was when I realized something else. My voice mattered, not because it was loud, but because it was true. I met my mother one final time, not to fix the past, not to promise the future, just to speak honestly. She looked older, quieter. She said, "I failed you." I listened. I did not interrupt. Then I said calmly, "I know," and I survived. There was no shouting, no dramatic ending, just truth. That meeting did not heal everything, but it closed a door gently instead of slamming it shut. That mattered. Later, I sat with a friend from the shelter and said, "I used to think being strong meant not feeling anything." She smiled softly and said, "Now you know better." I did know better. Some days were still hard. I still felt sadness. I still missed my father. I still had moments when fear returned, but I no longer felt broken. I felt whole, whole with cracks, whole with memories, whole with truth. Healing did not erase pain. It taught me how to live with it, how to carry it without letting it control me, how to rest without guilt, how to stay without fear. Before sleep one night, I whispered one final truth to myself. I am still standing. It was not a promise. It was a fact. My story did not end with happiness like a movie. It ended with strength like real life. Quiet, honest, unfinished in the best way. Strength is not silence. Strength is truth.
If you are living in quiet fear, please pause for a moment and listen to this. You do not need proof to deserve safety. You do not need bruises, witnesses, or perfect words. Feeling unsafe is reason enough, and your body knows before your mind can explain. Silence can make you doubt yourself. It can tell you to wait, to minimize, to stay polite. But you are allowed to speak. You are allowed to ask for help. You are allowed to choose yourself without guilt. Please tell someone you trust, a friend who listens, a teacher who cares, a counselor trained to help. You do not have to tell the whole story at once. One honest sentence is enough to begin. If this story touched you, you are not alone. Many people carry fear quietly, just like this. Writing it down, even in a comment, can be a first step toward being seen. Tell us, which chapter felt most real to you and why? Your answer may help someone else feel less alone tonight. If you want more true-to-life English stories like this, Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need it. Your voice matters more than you think.